If these were normal times, we might be together in the same room for a lunchtime lecture. If these were normal times, I'd be giving a talk on the Americanization of Moravian music, a summary of a talk that I had given at a conference last month entitled Becoming American, Moravians and Their Neighbors. These are not normal times. The year 2020 was supposed to be one of celebration of the music of Beethoven for his 250th anniversary year. The world pandemic has, of course, changed everything. We are saddened by the loss of life, concerned for the ongoing health of people around the world, and worried about the economic effects of this pandemic. These should rightly be our top-level concerns. We long to see the virus go away, to provide adequate testing and contact tracing, to find therapies to treat patients, to discover a vaccine and make it readily available to everyone so that life can get back to normal, although we're not really sure what normal will actually look like. This is also a major Beethoven anniversary year, and it was going to be big in Winston-Salem. Plans started with the Winston-Salem Symphony, Piedmont Opera, and Wake Forest University coordinating major concerts in town. Late in the fall of 2019, other local institutions were invited to a brainstorming session to put Winston-Salem on the Beethoven map in 2020. Thanks to the major marketing campaign supported by Mercedes-Benz of Winston-Salem, over 30 arts organizations in the city came together to coordinate and cooperate in a variety of events to celebrate Beethoven and his music. Today I'm going to share with you 5 first editions of Beethoven's music we've verified in Moravian Music Foundation collections, each followed by the RISM record with the updated list of other institutions who hold the same editions. RISM is an acronym. It stands for something in French that I sound silly trying to pronounce, but it's an international inventory of musical sources, both manuscript and printed music, held in libraries, archives, monasteries, schools, and private collections around the world. It's one of 2 platforms on which we're making our records searchable. The first, of course, is Gemeincat, which is on the OCLC platform, and the second is RISM. I volunteered to represent the Moravian Music Foundation at that brainstorming session with other area arts organizations, and I took a list of Beethoven's works, which I found on our online catalog, Gemeincat. As I looked more closely at these records, I noticed some pretty early dates and even missing dates. Since we were adding records to another database platform, RISM, it made sense to revisit the cataloging which had been done. I began to look closely at the plate numbers of early printed editions, and then to check online sources which aid in verifying publication dates. Then I checked Grove's dictionary, where first performance dates and first publication dates are listed. It was then that I realized we probably had the first edition of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. I want to make clear I did not discover this, but I realized this. More about that in a moment. The next step was to find a way to verify what I thought we had. The Foundation owns a collection of thematic catalogs. These are books which list works by a composer and provide detailed scholarly information about first performances of the works and first and early edition of works, and usually includes musical incipits, short number of measures to indicate the melody. Now you're probably familiar with the names of a few of these thematic catalogs. Kirschel numbers, for example, index the music of Mozart, or BWV, the Bach Werkverzeichnis, for the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. We own a copy of the Beethoven Thematic Catalog by Georg Kinski. It's a thick volume in German, but there were a few pencil annotations by former MMF director Ewald Nolte. He already knew we had a few of these first editions, but I'm not sure he ever publicized this in any way. I did further searching on OCLC, the platform we use for Gemeincat, to see what other libraries in the world claim to have the same edition. On OCLC, you can search by manufacturer number, a field which includes plate numbers. I found only a half dozen institutions which used the cataloging record, which included the plate number. Among these were the National Library of Poland, State Library at Berlin, Utrecht University, Oxford University, the Free Library of Philadelphia. Wow, we're in a pretty exclusive club. I then searched RISM and was surprised to find that only one participating library was claiming to have this first edition. The record had some inconsistencies too, which concerned me. I contacted Jennifer Ward in the RISM office in Frankfurt, Germany, to let her know what I think we had. I emailed her a picture of the title page and the first page of the first violin part. She confirmed with a copy of a newer Beethoven thematic catalog, the Beethoven Werkverzeichnis. We then contacted Dr. David Levy, professor at Wake Forest and an expert on Beethoven. By the time David Levy was able to visit us, we had identified several more probable first editions. Now, the reason I was not able to locate Beethoven first editions on RISM is because RISM's stated purpose has always been to catalog music manuscripts and early printed editions up to the year 1800. While the years following 1800 leaves out quite a lot of the printed music of Beethoven, who was born in 1770. Jennifer Ward at the RISM office in Frankfurt encouraged me to proceed with cataloging these editions, and she would add the holdings information for institutions which were listed in the Beethoven Werkverzeichnis. This was a longer list than I had found on OCLC, but it was an impressive list of world-renowned institutions, listed alphabetically by country code and then by library siglum. Gesellschaft der Musikfreunde in Vienna, the Austrian National Library, Beethoven House in Bonn, Germany. In Great Britain, the British Library, the Bodleian Library at Oxford University. In Netherlands, there was the Utrecht University, and in Poland, the National Library. Finally, in the U.S., the Free Library of Philadelphia, and the Brilliant Center for Beethoven Studies at San Jose State University, and the Moravian Music Foundation. As our director, Nola Knaus, has said in her homey way, we're no longer sitting on the porch, we're running with the big dogs. The Eighth Symphony resides in our collection of the Philharmonic Society of Bethlehem. Various authors have commented on the fact that Beethoven's odd-numbered symphonies, particularly the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th, are more dramatic than the even-numbered. One commentator refers to the odd-number symphonies as big, heroic game-changers. So it's interesting that Moravians apparently did not have copies of 3 of these symphonies, the 3rd, the Eroica, the iconic 5th, and the 7th symphonies. Was it a matter of musical taste that Moravians preferred the more classical or the more reserved, even-numbered symphonies? Or was it because the performing forces available were better suited to the even-numbered symphonies? If that's true, how do we explain the presence of the first edition of the Ninth Symphony, which we'll see in a moment? We see a few of the same institutions, Gesellschaft der Musikfreunde, Austrian National Library, State Library at Berlin, and in the U.S., the Brilliant Center for Beethoven Studies at San Jose, and the Moravian Music Foundation, where you'll see a link to our Gemeincat catalog. And from our Gemeincat record, a link back to the RISM record. The ability to link records across platforms is a nice feature for researchers. You'll be hearing more about linking to other platforms when we share a presentation about the music of the Bach sons. But for now, back to Beethoven. What I found surprising about the title page of the Ninth Symphony was how understated it was. It is such an icon of classical music. It broke ground featuring a chorus in the last movement. But the title page, at least that on the first violin part, looks rather plain. I was also surprised there weren't more institutions holding a copy of the first edition, less than 20. This more ornate title page is what I would have expected from the Ninth Symphony. However, this title page doesn't actually provide the title. This score is what we know as the Consecration of the House Overture. While growing up in Bonn, Beethoven studied with Neefe, who instructed him using Bach's well-tempered clavier with their preludes and fugues. Beethoven had become more familiar with the music of Handel through Baron von Swieten's musicales in the 1790s. By the time of Beethoven's death, he had collected a number of scores of the music of Bach and Handel. The Consecration of the House Overture is recognized as Beethoven's composing in the Handelian manner. This next one we took to the press conference to announce the Beethoven Rocks Winston-Salem campaign. But wait, opera Leonora? This one takes some explanation, both of the title page and the cataloging. Beethoven's only opera is Fidelio. The original libretto was written in French with the translated title Lenora, or Conjugal Love. It is the story of a young woman who dresses as a man, Fidelio, to get a job at a jail on the inside in order to spring her husband, who has been unjustly imprisoned. The premiere of Beethoven's opera occurred while Vienna was being occupied by Napoleon's armies. It was not a rousing success. Beethoven revised the work over the next years and wrote 3 different Leonora overtures. Finally, in 1814, came the final version of the opera Fidelio as we know it today. Fortunately, we still have the 3 Leonora overtures, and they are still played in concerts and recorded today. This is the first edition of what we now call the Leonora No. 3 overture, but the cataloging and the opus number still reflect the relationship to the opera Fidelio. These 5 scores are what we've identified as first editions of Beethoven in the various collections of the Moravian Music Foundation. Now I'd like to share with you several of the arrangements of Beethoven's music produced by some of his contemporaries. We won't have time to review them all in this presentation, but I wanted to highlight particularly those which we plan to feature in chamber music concerts at the Moravian Music Foundation as part of the Beethoven anniversary year. In 1810, just 1 year after Breitkopf&Härtel published the full score and parts of the Pastoral Symphony that we saw earlier, the same publisher issued an arrangement of the work for string sextet. Why would they do that? Well, in the early years of the 19th century, there were not many orchestras in existence. Subscription concerts for the public were virtually unheard of. Getting Beethoven's music out to small ensembles was a way to get his music heard by more people. Michael Gotthard Fischer was a contemporary of Beethoven, 3 years his junior, and was a student of Johann Christian Kittel, Johann Sebastian Bach's last pupil, and the only one of Bach's pupils to live into the 19th century. Another student of Kittel's was his nephew, Johann Wilhelm Hessler, of whom I spoke in the February Lunchtime Lecture from Russia with Love. Fischer was an organist in Erfurt, and in 1816, Fischer was appointed as a lecturer for general bass and organ playing at a college in Erfurt. Here we see holding institutions include the National Museum in the Czech Republic in Prague, Beethoven House in Bonn, National Library in Paris, Verdi Conservatory in Milan, the Ira Brilliant Center in San Jose, and the Moravian Music Foundation. Now I'm going to stop showing so many of these lists of institutions who hold these in order to get more pieces in the talk and to say more about them. Here's a piece of chamber music which is not an arrangement, but actually the way Beethoven had it published. But I'm including this because it was one of the pieces we scheduled for one of our chamber music concerts. We intended to pair this quintet with one by Mozart for the same instrumental ensemble, and even in the same key, which should provide a nice opportunity to compare and contrast between the Beethoven and the Mozart. We hope to get this rescheduled soon, featuring Barbara Lister-Sink and members of the Electro Wind Ensemble. This is an arrangement of Beethoven's music by contemporary. This is Beethoven's 4th Symphony for piano, flute, violin, and cello, arranged by Johann Nepomuk Hummel, whose dates are 1778 to 1837. In their early years in Vienna, both Beethoven and Hummel studied with Haydn and Albrechtsberger. Thus, Hummel was one of Beethoven's pianistic rivals. The two men had their ups and downs over the years, but at the end of his life, Beethoven asked Hummel to perform at his memorial service. After a career touring as a pianist, Hummel became Kapellmeister in Vienna in 1819 until his death in 1837. Between the years 1825 and 35, Hummel arranged the first 7 symphonies of Beethoven for piano, flute, violin, and cello. Hummel also arranged the first 7 Beethoven symphonies for piano solo, as did Franz Liszt. In fact, Liszt did all 9 Beethoven symphonies. This arrangement is part of the Philharmonic Society of Bethlehem collection and is planned to be performed at the Bethlehem Conference in October, along with the quintet for piano and winds that you just saw. The arrangements Hummel made of the first 7 Beethoven symphonies were for piano 2 hands. This arrangement of Beethoven's Second Symphony is for piano 4 hands. Although Hummel's name appears on the title page, the name of Brissler precedes. Friedrich Ferdinand Brissler was born in 1818 in Insterburg in Prussia and died in Berlin in 1893. He went in 1836 to Berlin in order to complete his studies. He became a teacher at the Stern Conservatory and made his name by making excellent arrangements of classical works. This title page is rather misleading. You see number 5 above the name Beethoven, and you naturally assume da-da-da-dum. But this is actually Beethoven's Second Symphony. It is part of a collection of symphonies by Diverse Auteurs, and it's the 5th in that series. Eber's dates are 1770 to 1836, so he was indeed a contemporary of Beethoven. In 1793, he became director of a troupe that toured around northern Germany. The Moravian Music Foundation holds 2 copies of this arrangement, one in the Salem Collegium, the other in the Philharmonic Society of Bethlehem collection. Here's another printed edition which is not an arrangement, but a chamber music work in its original form, the Opus 12 sonatas for piano and violin. One of these was planned for our chamber music concerts. Here's an early edition of the Overture to Fidelio. Remember, I mentioned the first 3 overtures Beethoven wrote for his only opera are the 3 Leonora overtures. This is what Beethoven finally decided on for his opera. It was published during his lifetime in 1822, a few years after the premiere of his final revision of the opera. One of the works which the Winston-Salem Symphony planned to perform at an all-Beethoven concert in April, which is now rescheduled for July, is the Mass in C. The Philharmonic Society of Bethlehem holds 2 editions in the same folder, one published by Simrock, the other by Breitkopf and Hertel. But both editions feature both the traditional Latin text as well as a German version, which is not a direct translation. In fact, the Simrock edition doesn't even use the word Mass, or Messe, but rather drei Hymnen, 3 hymns. Well, that's a quick overview of the first editions of the music of Beethoven, which are found in the collections of the Moravian Music Foundation, plus a few other arrangements and early editions. I hope this has piqued your interest and whetted your appetite for live concerts once those may safely be resumed. In the meantime, stay safe, be well, and watch for other videos from the Moravian Music Foundation.